Inspirational Creatives, episode 197. Welcome to Inspirational Creatives. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence. Join me every Friday as I chat with successful artists, producers, and creative entrepreneurs who share powerful stories and strategies. They can help you to create the life that you want. Listen each week as these inspirational creatives show you how to take your creativity to the next level. You'll learn how to create a sustainable business that inspires others and gives you the financial freedom and lifestyle that you want. Thanks for listening. Make sure you sign up at inspirationalcreatives.com to get free exclusive bonus material. And now, on with the show. Rob here and welcome to another episode of Inspirational Creatives. My guest today is somebody who helps musicians make a living from their music. Since quitting her job as a director of finance to pursue her love for music, she's founded the Women of Substance Radio to promote quality female artists in all genres, and today runs a podcast called The Female Entrepreneur Musician. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today, Bree Noble. Bree, welcome.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
So for our listener who may not have met you yet, Bree, how would you describe yourself in the world today and what it is that you do?
Well, I am a business coach for musicians, and I like to think that I bring entrepreneurial strategies and mindset to musicians, which I feel like when I was a musician full-time, I was lacking in that area, which was kind of weird because I was a business major as well as a music major. So, it's just for some reason, when I went into the world of music, like all of that business mindset went out the window. And so I, see over the years as I learned to implement some of that stuff into my music. And now that I'm running a business and I'm really focused on entrepreneurial strategies, I just see the value of thinking like a business as a musician. And that's what I try to bring to my audience and my students.
That's awesome. I'd love to get into this stuff about this blend of entrepreneurship with being a musician. But before we go there, let's talk about your relationship with music and why you love music so much. And what does it mean to you to be creative and a musician?
Oh my gosh. I mean, music has been a big part of my life forever, I think. Got started as many people do in church music. And then it was like my life in high school. I was in every single choir that was available. I did solo competitions. And then in college, same thing. I was in a touring ensemble for the college, and we went out twice a month on weekends and did mini tours. And I just got so much great experience that way. And, choir and all that stuff. And I met my husband in choir. We were that cheesy choir couple that met on the first choir tour and got engaged on the last choir tour.
Oh, great.
So, music has been an integral part of my life. I remember, when I was in high school and college, I was obsessed with making mixtapes, which I think I'm convinced now is why I run a radio station and podcast for music, because, it was always an obsession to me to have a great mix of music. And I loved bringing back cool retro tracks that people hadn't heard in a long time. And people still remember me for that from college, just being that always providing the music for us when we'd go on tour in the van to listen to. And then I worked for an opera company too. So I sang opera in college as well as being in this pop band. So I've just kind of hit all sides of music, and all of them have fed me creatively in some way or another.
That's amazing. I completely relate with what you're saying there. I used to make mixtapes too. And so the question I'm begging to ask then is, how come you weren't a professional musician from the off? How did you end up in the world of finance and all the rest of it?
Well, not for a lack of trying. I basically had no clue. I wasn't prepared by my college music department. They educated me. I mean, I can run circles around people in music theory. I can analyze any piece of music, but do I know how to actually find a job or, a career, or even know where to start after college? I had no clue. So, I was a little bit smart in that I decided that I also loved business and decided to get a double degree there. And it was kind of my fallback. And when I moved after college to a new place and knew no one and had no connections whatsoever, I found it really difficult to just start a career in music. So I ended up doing my fallback plan and, going to work in the finance and accounting area. And I tried all along the way, like for 10 years as I was in that world, to do music on the side, figuring out, thinking that I needed to find somebody else that already had a plan because I didn't have one. And so I was constantly like, in the recycler and the penny saver, looking for bands that were looking for singers. And, I went through a half dozen at least bands during that time of mediocre and bad experiences, trying to fit myself into someone else's mold and not realizing all along that I just needed to take the bull by the horns and figure out how to run my own career as a business person would, starting a small business.
And so what did that look like when you decided to do that?
It looked like learning how to build a fan base from the ground up, thinking strategically as far as, anytime I'm in front of people, I'm capturing names to my email list and building my fan base and always making sure that I've got flyers out there so people know I'm available for performing at all kinds of different venues. And, I see a lot of musicians now that they go out there and they sing, but they don't have any follow-up, even just having a flyer on a table or postcards or getting people onto your email list, that is follow-up because it allows you to connect with them in some way. And that was how I really built, and then I would just, make myself available when I first started to people that I knew in my church. And, and when people start realizing that you're available, then they start thinking, oh, well, I need somebody for this program. Or, you never know who that's in like another capacity, like they run a nonprofit organization who needs to do events, or they're involved in a women's organization that has events every month. So that's why I always had flyers and postcards and got people on my email list, because it would have me front of mind when those things would come up. And I just started getting so many referrals that I stopped having to call out getting bookings for myself.
So this is a case of showing up.
Yeah, and not waiting around. I mean, that was my problem. I waited around. I tried to play someone else's game instead of playing my own.
Yeah, so this is a case of stepping up to our own game, showing up versus waiting around.
Yes.
You mentioned there live performance. Was that always a part of your strategy?
Definitely. When I started, online was not huge yet. I mean, I definitely had a really good following, like on places like mp3.com. I actually got a lot of my start there as well. But at the same time, I was doing lots of live performances. And for me, it was a lot of churches, women's groups, moms groups, because it was my perfect audience and it worked well for me. As far as, when I was starting out, I had little kids. And so most of those places actually had childcare and they didn't mind if I brought my kids.
Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned a moment ago about thinking strategically. So that was also part of your strategy in that sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I needed to make my career work for my lifestyle at that point. And so I needed to base everything around that, the kind of gigs I was even looking for. I was touring, but I was only touring in certain areas at certain times. And so I would get an anchor gig and then I would just work really hard to build a tour around that because I didn't want to go out that many times every year. So I would just kind of build my tours. I mean, I brought my mom with me to watch my kids. It was kind of a bit of a production when I would go on tour. And that's why I would just make sure to plan it really well and do like 1 to 3 gigs a day while I was out.
I love this strategy that you have there, which is almost the lifestyle first, or the type of business that you want as a musician. Because I can imagine for many people that would be a block. They would think, well, you can't do it that way. But it seems to me that you're thinking about how you want to do it first and then working out how to do it.
Yeah. And it's not like I'm a super smart person. Like I learned that from trying the other thing and it not working, or, just going, okay, like there's no way that I'm going to have the kind of music career that I thought I was going to have now that I have kids. It's not going to happen, but I don't want to give up this dream. So how can I make it work?
Fascinating. I'd love to talk to you about your podcast and also how you made that transition from the corporate world to becoming a full-time musician. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit more about some of the challenges that many musicians and artists face, in particular the one about making money from their art. Why do you believe that many musicians are faced with the challenges of creating a living doing what they love?
There's a couple reasons. So I think the first one is that they buy into the idea of the starving artist and that they allow people to treat them as a starving artist. Now, this is not me saying that you can't do free or low paying gigs. Those are sometimes very warranted because of what you can get out of them. So if they're a gig that's really going to help you network to get other gigs, or if it's a gig where you're going to be making a lot of different fans there that you wouldn't normally be able to be in contact with, and if you've got a system to capture those, then in a way you are making income from that because you will make income from those fans down the line. But it's thinking strategically about the gigs that you do take, whether they're paid or not, how you're going to eventually monetize those by making sure that you capture any fans. And like I said, having postcards and flyers, like you would be surprised at how many times I got calls from just flyers that I put on my table and me just saying something during the performance, I perform at, and telling them all the ideas of things that I perform at, Christmas teas and churches and Mother's Day events and, just kind of calling out fundraisers, calling out all the things, which really sparks in the audience's mind. Oh, I just realized I'm going to have to get a program for, my fundraiser in July. Maybe I should at least grab her flyer in case she's right for this. And then when it gets to like June and they're like, oh crap, I haven't gotten anyone for this yet. Oh, wait, I have this flyer. Let me call her. You know what I mean? And then they don't have to work so hard.
I love that. So with that in mind, then, what are some of the more successful ways that you and other musicians that you work with are making a living from their music today? What sort of approaches do you see working?
Well, I highly recommend house concerts because it's a chance to really, really get to know your fans on an intimate level and get to meet new people and make them fans. Because house concerts are small, intimate gatherings, usually where the host invites a bunch of their friends. So they're people that don't necessarily know you, but it's like you've got a foot in the door with them because they've been invited by their friend. And they're basically recommending you. And so, it's an experience where you're like hanging out with these people in a house. It's very low key. You can get to know them a little bit before you actually do the concert. When you do the concert, it's like you're 5 to 10 feet away from them. You can really interact with them, ask them questions during the show, just really create a special experience. And number one, they will want to reciprocate by giving you donations and buying merch because they'll have had such a special experience. And then number two, like if you make sure and capture their fan information, you've already kind of made super fans out of them because they've had such a cool, intimate experience with you. They'll likely never forget you as an artist.
I love that. So in the first instance, it's about developing relationships and creating that personal connection with people, giving them a special experience like a house concert. And then in the second instance, it's like inviting them to carry on that conversation through an email list, for example.
Yes. I mean, I can't stress enough the importance of an email list. That is how I built my whole career because I would keep in contact with them, anywhere from once a week to once a month. And so I was always top of mind whenever something came up where they needed a musician or they heard of somebody that needed a musician. Like anytime that a musician came up and they realized, oh, I need something for this, or they have a friend that did, I would be top of mind and they'd be like, oh, I know somebody. And that is where I got so many of my gigs down the line, and it didn't have to be calling out all the time, getting, cold bookings, because I had this connection with them, this continuous connection. And then of course, when social media came along, then you connect with all those people on social media and they have a more continuous connection with you than just once a week or every other week.
So this is keeping relevant in their space, kind of being on their radar.
Yes, being on their radar. It really is the reason that we have an email list, because like I said, like when something comes up, they need a musician. If they have no way to contact you and they can't necessarily remember like, oh, how did I spell that artist's name? Or, or they just can't recall your name, but they remember this great concert you did, it's not going to help you in that moment. So being in their inbox it always gives them a way to contact you directly or at least have your website.
You mentioned social media there. What ways are you using social media to keep that connection tight?
Well, I use social media all the time, especially for my podcast, because every time I have a new episode, I can post that. What I've been doing lately is recording some of my episodes on Facebook Live. A lot because I want to model this for my students and my audience, because we have such a great opportunity with Facebook Live to connect with our audience. Recently, I actually was performing somewhere in town, which I don't do that often nowadays because I'm so busy with the business, but I still try to do it every once in a while. I'm actually performing next week. So, I try to do it maybe once, twice a month if I can. But I was performing and I had done some of the songs for a while. So I was practicing and I thought, you know what? I'm going to practice this song. I'm going to do it on Facebook Live just for fun. And so I actually did it from my own profile. I had like 30 people show up live, just watching me practice in my home studio. And then I had like over 2,000 people view the video later and, tons of comments and social. I mean, the thing with social media is social proof. Like if you get, I got like 50 or more comments on that video of people going, wow, that was amazing. I can't believe that you can sing like that. And, all that social proof is going to help you get more fans and more gigs. So that's one way you can use social media for sure and your friends will share it. It's amazing because if they think it's a great performance and it makes them feel cool to know you as a musician, they're going to want to share it with people. And that's how you can get new fans.
So what do you think is at the essence of being able to create social proof in that sense?
I think it's just putting yourself out there, not being afraid to share it, not being afraid to ask. I mean, when you're on Facebook Live, you can totally say, if you like this, I'd so appreciate it. It would mean the world to me if you would share this with your friends or let them know about my event that's coming up next week. Like, don't be afraid to ask for that share.
Yeah. I can imagine our listener listening to this, they might be feeling a bit nervous about trying something like Facebook Live. What would you recommend to them in terms of building their confidence doing something like that?
Well, first you can start by just recording yourself, not on Facebook Live, but pretending that it's Facebook Live and watching back your video and see if there's anything that you don't like about what you're doing or, that looks strange or you have weird tics or whatever. We all have those. And, then I would just say, just do it. I mean, you can always delete the video and, the likelihood of that many people showing up live is not that high nowadays because there's so much going on social media. But, if 3 people show up and then you just absolutely hate the video, just delete it and no one else sees it, right? But you just got to do it. People are so forgiving in the live space. When I record my podcast live, I know that I'm, occasionally stammering a little bit or saying, and, when I'm recording my podcast and I can edit it, it's different. I can pull all that out. But people understand that it's live. They appreciate the position you're in, putting yourself up live, and they just want to see the authenticity of you, like raw and uncut.
Yeah, I completely get that. Is there something to be said also for consistency as well? I mean, you can try these few sort of initial videos and get there and get out on Facebook Live. But then in terms of building your audience and building social proof from that point forward, is there something to be said about consistency?
Absolutely. I mean, I would recommend to any artist that can fit it into their schedule to set up a time once a week that you go live. Let all of your fans know that's the time. And, be sure to remind them in several ways that it's the time. And, maybe debut a new song every week or, just do, a different song every week. And the other great thing about Facebook Live is that you should definitely include a call to action of some kind. So, if you're doing a song and it's from an album that you've put out, then say, go check out my album on iTunes and, include the link or say, subscribe to my YouTube channel and you can see the official video of this song. Maybe you're doing an acoustic version on Facebook Live. Think of some way that you can tie in whatever you're doing to an action that they can take. It could be share with your friends. It could be go to this link and sign up to get tickets to my event next week. And it could just be go to this link and get your free download of this song. So anytime that you can tie that to an action that your fans or potential fans are taking, again, that's strategic. Like, don't just go out there and perform live every week and not have any way to get something out of it. When you're building your brand, but you want to be able to see if it's effective or not. And you can see that by asking them to take an action and then see how many people are taking that action.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess you could try different actions at different time and see what works with certain audiences.
Absolutely.
So we're beginning to get into this territory where we start thinking like a creative entrepreneur. I'm meeting more and more musicians who are becoming entrepreneurial. What do you believe is the benefit of thinking like an entrepreneur as a musician, Bree?
I think there's so many benefits. To me, the biggest benefit is actually having a plan. So I see a lot of musicians, and I know I was this way when I first started, just throwing things out there and hoping that they'll work and trying all kinds of millions of different things and not having a strategy behind it. So I teach a lot of setting goals, deciding on what those goals are going to be for the next 90 days. Things that are not on your goal list, you may not do them for those 90 days. They are distractions. They will make it impossible to reach the goals that you did choose. So I love that framework from the entrepreneurial side because that was something I didn't have as a musician, and a lot of people that I see don't have. They think they're working on their music business every day, but because they don't have a plan, they feel like they're putting all this time and effort in, but they're not getting any results and they're not seeing any progress. And so setting up a framework where you can actually track whether you're making progress every day when you spend time on your music career, that is really, really, really helpful.
Yeah, I really like that idea of having a plan, not just for the sake of having a plan and a structure to follow, but also as something where you can actually measure your progress and what's working and what's not.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important.
So I know there are many people out there, and parents particularly, you mentioned earlier, taking your kids to gigs and things like that. There's folks out there trying to create a lifestyle, the sort of lifestyle that we're talking about here. But I also recognise that particularly for parents, they're time constrained. So what would be your advice to them in terms of overcoming that? If they've not got much time to focus on this stuff, but they want to build a living or a life around their own creative interests, where would you start, Bree? What would your advice to them be?
I've got a couple ideas. I have some students that are like that. They have a full-time job, and I just tell them, okay, when you are looking at your calendar and how much time you have every week to spend on your goals, just set aside whatever the time is that you can spend on music. Like, don't feel guilty that you're not doing it during the day because you obviously have a full-time job, but maybe the time that you work every week is from 8 to 10 p.m. every night. And that's the time you have. And then if you allot that time based upon your goals, then you know that even though you're spending just a small amount of time, it's actually being productive. And you're not just wasting that time. And you can actually see fruit come from that small amount of time that you have. I would also say that when I was a musician, I also on the side started Women of Substance radio and podcast, which eventually grew into the Female Entrepreneur Musician and the Musicians Academy and all that stuff. But when I started that radio station, it was a total hobby. It was a side project and it was not my main focus. But what I did do was I figured out a way to make it self-sustaining. So it wasn't costing me any money. And so then I could do this hobby thing on the side for several years, hoping that someday it would grow into something bigger, but not knowing. And also knowing that the time that I spent on it, it was something that I loved. So I didn't resent it. I think that's what's important. Like if you're trying to do something on the side, it's got to be something that you would do anyway. Like if someone said, you have an entirely free day, what do you want to do? And I'd be like, well, I'd like to, work on my radio station, because that's the type of thing I used to do with my free time, make mixtapes and all that. So I didn't resent the time that I was spending reviewing music when, my kids were napping or my kids were asleep and that was the only free time I had. Or I was on tour and I was having to do it at a host family's home or something. I didn't resent that because I enjoyed it. And I just think that's the key to building something on the side, is it has to be something that you don't resent doing in your free time. And then maybe eventually it becomes your full-time thing.
Yeah, I love that. It's not forgetting that we should be enjoying this stuff.
Right.
And putting the enjoyment first, and also being strategic with that. So even though we're doing stuff that we love doing, also having some kind of plan around that. Was that the case for you? That time when you made that transition from the corporate world to becoming a full-time musician, can you remember the time you came up with the decision to make that transition? And then what happened from that point on? Was this something you did slowly, or was it just a big bang decision? As of this day, I'm going to be a full-time musician. What happened?
I wish it was that strategic. So I was kind of actually forced to leave corporate because of stress and health issues and having a 1-year-old. My corporate job, because I worked at a nonprofit, became very stressful. We never had enough money. We'd just gone through like the .com boom where we thought we had plenty of money and we could spend. And then all of a sudden everything crashed, and all these people that had tons of money from stocks all of a sudden had like half that much money. So it was very stressful at the end. I started having health issues. I had just had a baby, which didn't help. The stress, the no sleep, all that stuff. So I quit corporate thinking, yes, this will give me time to work on my music career, but it was more of I just can't do this anymore kind of thing. I can't do all these things. And the music, I was still doing the music on the side. And that was just another thing that was pulling at my time as well. And I'm just like, I need to choose. And so I need to simplify. So that's how that happened. And, we managed to be able to sell our house for a very good price during that time period and move somewhere closer to my husband's work, somewhere smaller, and have that money as a reserve. So I was strategic in that way. I needed to figure out an exit. I didn't just like one day quit. But once I was home, then I was like, okay, now I have the time and space and like mental capacity to figure out how to do the music career. And that was the only way that I ever reached this idea of approaching it as a business person or as an entrepreneur, because before that, I was just, like I said, trying to put myself in other people's situations and finding bands and things that I thought were going to be my ticket. And so having that time and space to really start to go, oh, you know what? I need to approach this from a different angle, and then realizing that was me taking control as a business owner. And that would never have happened had I continued to work in corporate, because I just wouldn't have had the mental capacity to figure all that out.
Did you rush into things? Did you get excited about this idea once you started to think strategically about, from a business point of view, seeing yourself as a musician in that way? I see a lot of people getting overwhelmed, and they're working all hours that can be sent to them in terms of trying to get their own small business or entrepreneurial kind of idea off the ground. Was that the case for you?
I don't think I rushed into it. I said, I had health issues. And so because of that, during that time period, I had a lot of time to think. I was in the hospital, and it gave me a lot of time to think out how I was going to approach it. And I really believe during that time is when I realized that I needed to make this switch. And the first thing I did was realize I needed to record a professional album. And so I did that, and I took my time with that. It took about 6 months. But once I had that, I immediately started booking stuff. And even though I had no experience doing what I was about to do, which was doing a program where I was speaking as well as singing. So I was doing kind of an inspirational program that included stories from my life and along with my songs. And, I'd spoken on stage as far as like introducing songs and stuff, but I had no experience really giving, a talk. And so I got booked for my first talk at a nonprofit organization, which was going to be like, in front of 200 people. And that was my trial by fire. Like I had never given this talk before. I wrote it, I practiced it, and I did it for the first time there. And after that, I was like, okay, I could do this. It wasn't perfect, but I can do this. And so I started booking stuff, and I started booking tours like crazy.
That's great. What was the talk about, out of interest?
So I actually have grown up with glaucoma, which means that I've had low vision.
Mm.
And so it was just talking about how people in my life have inspired me and helped me along the way, and how I've learned to navigate life with like a new vision. And a lot of my songs tie into that. So it's very inspirational. And I've given it a lot of women's and moms organizations and community organizations, because people suffer from a lot of different issues in their life. I mean, I've had some people come up to me and say, your songs and your talk really inspired me to try to get to deal with my depression, and that's a totally different issue, but it's the same that we all have things that we deal with. And it just somehow makes people feel like they're not alone, to hear that somebody that, they may have thought when they walked in and saw me had it all together. I talk about my health issues, like all the things that I've gone through in my life. And for me, being authentic was what it was all about with my audience, because I felt like there was no point in being on stage if I wasn't going to truly be myself and tell my story. And that was something that I came to over years. And that's another kind of transition that I made from my younger self, who just wanted to be this famous singer. And I didn't want anyone to know about, I wanted them to all think I was perfect.
Yeah, I can imagine sharing your story at any level for the first time is a challenging thing to do. Has it over time helped you build your inner confidence, being able to share your vulnerabilities and challenges?
Definitely. It's definitely easier in person. I feel like when you're online, there's not as much of a chance for people to really get where you're coming from and feel your heart. So I think that's harder to portray, like on social media and online, but in person, I'm completely comfortable with it now after years of giving that talk, and, having people come up to me like in tears and share their story with me, and realizing that I really am making an impact.
Yeah, I love that. Have you found that the more experience you've got offline sharing your story, the more confident you've become sharing your story online?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think when I first started, I was like, I don't want to share any personal details with anyone, because I saw all these people with their shiny, family pictures, and, the way people show up on Facebook, sometimes, they only show the best of what's going on. I just try to encourage my students as much as possible to share the real them, but with a positive spin. So for me, it's not like, woe is me. I spent 13 days in the hospital. Like, I always want to put the positive spin on that. Like, that gave me time to reflect and really understand that my purpose was to go out and, and give this talk and to share my songs. So I always try to put a positive spin on everything that I talk about in my life that has been a struggle.
I love how you're empowering other people by doing these things to model it for them. With that in mind, I'm dying to ask you about your own podcast, Female Entrepreneur Musician. It's pretty clear who it's for. So tell me more about how that got started, what inspired you to create that, and how's that podcast been for you, and how is it helping your listeners with their aims?
Well, obviously I knew what niche I was going for. I had worked with female musicians in the Women of Substance radio for years, and I wanted to serve them specifically. So I chose that name strategically, and because I did want to marry the music and the entrepreneurial. And I wanted to find independent musicians who were having success to come on and talk to me in an interview style, to find out, what they're doing and how they're making their money as musicians. Because I think that independent musicians starting out, they just can't see the big picture of like how they'll be able to make enough money as a musician. So it's been really encouraging to hear from all these different perspectives of how these musicians are making their money, how they got their start, what were their big breaks and aha moments along the way, where they struggled and what they learned from that. Those are a lot of the kinds of questions I ask. And, then we go into real tactical stuff too. And I do some solo episodes with some specific tactical stuff of how people can use certain marketing tactics or business tactics or performing tactics to further their career. And I have gotten so much great feedback from it. I have somebody whose testimonial I put right on our site who listened to the show, got so many great ideas and tactics and inspiration that she and her band did a crowdfunding campaign, managed to fund their entire album by building up this great fan base of loyal fans. And they launched their album. It's done really well. Now they're working with a big PR agent. Things are going great for them. And she said, it all started with listening to this show.
That's fascinating. Yeah. Have there been any sort of themes that have surfaced asking those kinds of questions to your guests?
When I say, tell me about a time that you struggled, tell us a story and how you overcame that. And I usually get I could tell you about 100 or, or I say, was there a time that you thought about giving up? And they're like 50 billion times, because there's so many ups and downs in the music industry. I definitely have talked to enough people that have had promises made to them by the industry or thought that they were set. And then it turns out that none of that was real. And so I just try to encourage people to take their own career in their own hands. And even if they've got other people helping them that they trust, to always know what's going on and to always have their hands into every part of their business so they know if they were to lose these people that are helping them, they would still know how to run it.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What do you think have been some of the biggest lessons for you, Bree, having run this podcast? How long has it been running for now?
So the Female Entrepreneur Musician has been running almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years, April 1st. My Women of Substance podcast had been running since November 2014. So that's been 2.5 years. Consistency is a big lesson. Like, it's hard to do it every week. I actually pulled back on the Female Entrepreneur Musician last year and did it every other week. But now that I can use Facebook Live, and it's so much easier somehow to set a time with myself and say, I'm doing this at this time, then I don't back out. And so now I'm doing Facebook Lives 2 weeks a month, and then my interviews the other 2 weeks a month.
Got it.
And so I've pulled it back up to every week, and I'm having a lot of fun with it.
And what have been some of the biggest insights for you, Bree, running a podcast?
I think you never know who's listening. I put it out there. I have a pretty good sized mailing list, but I'm always surprised when somebody emails me and says, I've listened to every episode. And I'm like, really? I don't know. It's just when you put your stuff out in the world, somehow you think, oh, okay, that's done. And but then someone will come back to me and say, I listened to episode number 9, and I learned this. And I'm like, wow, I haven't thought about episode number 9 for a long time, but those things live forever and they can continue to help people. And so I think that's one of the big values of podcasts and blogs and, things like that live on forever online. But I also think with podcasts, you make a much better connection because they're listening to you, your voice on their phone or on their computer or in their car or in their earbuds when they're exercising. Then people feel like they really know you.
It's one of the things that I absolutely love about podcasting is that kind of intimate connection that you can create. I feel that as a listener as well as somebody who has a podcast. But also it's very much the beginning of a conversation, I find. Do you too?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I definitely get people commenting all the time about what's said on the podcast and their own take. And yeah, I could start a forum probably on every single show and have plenty of people, commenting about that show and how it impacted them. I definitely think that different shows impact different people. And it's great because there's usually, over time, something for everyone. Sometimes we'll talk about music licensing and certain people are really into that. And sometimes we're talking about live performing. People are really into that. Or we're talking about, selling music online. We try to cover the gamut of subjects. So there's always something for everyone, whatever stage they're at in their music career.
That's amazing. Going back to that time when you had that corporate career and between then and now, how has your lifestyle changed in that time?
Making less money. It was hard to leave a corporate job because I was making good money. But to me, there's so much value in freedom and flexibility and low stress.
Mm.
So for me, my life, like I don't get up in the morning and like grit my teeth, like what I'm going to have to deal with when I get to work, I get to make my own schedule, and I'm pretty much a taskmaster on myself. I don't sleep in, I have a list of all the things I need to do. So it's not like I'm being lazy, but I get to control that. And I also don't have other people's agendas in general affecting what I do and stressing me out.
Yeah, so much to be said for that. So if you could go back to the younger Bree and give her some ideas or wisdom, what would you say to her?
I would definitely say that you don't need to be seeking fame. Everybody can have their own little corner of the music business. You just need to find who your people are, who the people are that like really love what you do as a musician. And you don't need to wait for anyone. You need to take control of your own career, because I just didn't understand that for so long. And I wasted all of my 20s not doing that, not taking any action and building something. I could have had a such bigger fan base had I spent that 10 years building my fan base instead of just trying this and trying that.
Yeah. So it's about taking ownership and taking action in that sense.
Yes, absolutely.
And for anyone that may not know who their people are, have you got any ideas or advice for them?
I would definitely, sit down with some friends or people that like your music and ask them to describe it or what they like about it. And then also just kind of look at all the people that are your fans and try to find some commonalities. For me, I did start to realize, I really resonate with moms. I resonate with, women in their 30s to 50s, sometimes older. And then I found too that I had different types of audiences based upon what I was singing. So, I had some people that just loved it when I did classical and Broadway music. And I made an album for them because that's what they love. That's what they wanted to buy. Some people love the Christian contemporary stuff. So I have an album for them. Some people just love it when I sing crossover. It's not religious in any way, but it's just really inspirational. And so I have, songs for that. So there can be different segments of your audience, but I can definitely picture the perfect person that if I were to look out in the audience, I can picture what that person looks like, how old they are, if they have kids, if they're married, if they like to drink Starbucks or what their lifestyle is like. And that doesn't mean obviously everybody in your audience is like that, but that can be kind of the person that encapsulates your audience. And then you can sing to them and make music for them.
Fascinating. That's really good. So, Bree, I'm really, really grateful for your time today. I'd like to ask you, what are you grateful for today?
Oh, gosh. I was just going to say I'm grateful for the rain because it's absolutely pouring rain right now here in California, and we haven't had rain for 4 years. So I'm grateful for my students. I really, really love working with them. I'm grateful for the fact that they are grateful for what I do and that they show that. I mean, I just saw a post last night that I was like, I have to show this to my husband. This is so amazing. One of my students just telling me how much they appreciate what I do and everything that they've learned, or showing me all the fruits of their labor and that they had all these goals and that this is all the progress that they've made. I love in my Female Musician Academy, every Wednesday, we have Wins Wednesday. And everybody posts all their wins for the week. And then on Monday, we have Milestone Monday, where people post like more specific things. Like I reached 1,000 people on my email list, or I just performed for like the biggest audience I've ever performed for. It was 1,000 people, stuff like that. And when people post that stuff, I'm so grateful for it because I know that I was a little piece of that.
That must be tremendously rewarding.
It is. Yeah. It is. It's what keeps me getting up at 4:35 in the morning every day.
I love it.
Because there's so much more I want to do,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a case of, can you do it all?
Uh-huh.
In that context then, what's inspired you recently?
My academy inspires me every day. So I'm just inspired to provide even more help and specific training for them in what they need. So, the more I hear from them about what they're struggling with and the kind of training that they're looking for, the more I'm looking to give them that, whether it's me giving them that training or finding the expert that is the best in that area and delivering that to them. That's just what inspires me right now, is just making the Female Musician Academy even better than it already is.
That's awesome. So what's next for you, Bree?
Oh my gosh, what's next for me? I don't know. This year is all about, I did a lot last year. And this year is all about making everything that I do better and connecting even more with all of my students and my audience. And I'm really enjoying this Facebook Live podcasting thing that just started in 2017. So I feel like that's still next for me, and that, finding my voice on Facebook Live and being even more comfortable with delivering my podcast that way.
That's great. Yeah, that's really inspiring. And finally, where can our listener find out more about you, your music and your work, and of course, your podcast?
Yes, I would love to have them come to femmusician.com. That's F as in female, E as in entrepreneur, musician, femmusician.com, and check out our podcast there. And also, if you go to femmusician.com/income, then you can grab our 19 proven sources of income that you probably haven't considered for your music business that will help you. If you're already kind of, working as a musician, it'll give you some new ideas of income streams. And then if you haven't even started yet, it will give you some inspiration on where to start.
That's great. So that's femmusician.com and femmusician.com/income.
Correct.
Fabulous. Well, I'll put the links in the episode show notes. And Bree, thank you so much for your time today.
You are welcome. This has been super fun.
You are my vision, my only vision. You are the ribbon around my soul. Your eyes see through me. Your words renew me. You are the hand I want to hold. You are my vision, my greatest vision. You are the heaven that lights the dark. You are my reason, my gift of freedom. You are the breath inside my heart. I was like a river running dry. I'd forgotten how to sing and dance and fly. I'd given up on everything, just trying to survive. Then you threw the moon and stars into my eyes. You are my vision, my sweetest vision. You are the crimson that paints the rose. When winter finds me, you're right beside me. You are the spring that melts the snow. I was like a river running dry. I'd forgotten how to sing and dance and fly. I'd given up on everything, just trying to survive. Then you threw the moon and stars into my eyes. The sun and moon and stars into my eyes. Lord, you are my vision, my only vision.
Thanks for listening. Nothing beats the stories and advice of an expert to help you raise your creative game. I would love to know what you thought about today's episode, so don't forget to subscribe in iTunes, where you can rate and review the show. If you like this episode, I invite you to share it on Facebook or Twitter with the one person you know who will benefit from the wisdom shared here today. You can find the show notes on inspirationalcreatives.com/podcast. If you have a burning question or a great idea for a guest, head on over to inspirationalcreatives.com/contact, where you can connect with me there.